We are live. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to this buddy read discussion. It's our last buddy read discussion for May of the Moderns, which is good because it's May 31st, end of the day. And I'd like to welcome my lovely co-hosts. Oh no, did I do it? I thought I muted the other tab.
I think that was me.
Oh,
Sorry.
Okay. I just clicked that up and I was like, I did it again. Happy to welcome my lovely co-host. Let me start that over. Bethanne Bruninga-Socolar and S.D. Huston of the similarly named channel. So Bethanne, you want to tell us how you're doing today and what brought you to this book?
Yeah, I'm doing good today. I do the typical BookTube channel stuff, if anyone's watching and isn't familiar with my channel. And I was just telling Margaret before we got started, I came to this book, I think sort of randomly. I picked it up, I think just in a used bookstore because I saw the name Langston Hughes and I was like, oh, that's clearly something I should read and have on my shelf. And then last year I read it for the first time for Margaret's first iteration of May of the Moderns to fit one of the bingo prompts. And then this year saw that she was sort of recycling into her list books that other people had read last year and was interested in reading this. And I was like, I loved it the first year. So I signed on to do a reread. So yeah, spoiler alert, most of me in this conversation is going to be like, I love this book. Why does no one love it as much as I do?
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, we'll have to get like general impressions to start off to see if we're basically on the same page.
Yeah, we'll see.
Shannon, how about you? How are you doing today? And what brought you to this book?
Well, hello, my name is Shannon and I write under the pen name S.D. Huston and I have a YouTube channel under the same name of S.D. Huston. And I am pretty firmly on the AuthorTube side of the line, but I think most of us writers, we love to read and we can often prioritize writing over reading if we don't do it right. And so I love that Margaret has these different readathons and I always appreciate and love her insight. So I came to this through Morgan.
Hi, Morgan.
She's in the chat. So hello, Morgan. I saw her pop in through Margaret. And I chose this specific book because I had never actually read any of Langston Hughes' prose. I used to give his poems as assignments to my students when I was teaching college English and literature. So, and I loved his poems. And I would say between the poems and the prose now that I've read, I still love his poems way much better. The use of his language is beautiful. But I did also like his prose as well.
Nice. Excellent. Well, welcome here today. If anyone in the chat has questions throughout, feel free to pop it in the comments so we can address it. I've got some like general buddy read questions that we can go through, but usually I start with like, where are we here? What did we give the book? What are our general impressions? And I'll start with that one because I didn't do an intro because it's my channel. So I give this like 4.25. I was like sad. And then like the last 10% of the book, I was like, oh, but that's beautiful. Oh, but that's, oh. And so it finished really nicely. But a lot of it was like, whew. Yeah. So that's my general impressions. How about you guys?
Go ahead, Bethanne.
Oh, well, I sort of already gave away my spoiler.
Oh, okay.
I love this book. Yeah, and I mean it's definitely sad in a lot of parts. But the thing I love about it is, I mean, and the title sort of alludes to this, not without laughter, is that even in, so much oppression and hardship and poverty, just the joy that all of the characters in the book find at different times. Well, I shouldn't say all of them. Some of them are like sort of miserable for a lot of the time, but especially our main character, Sandy, this little kid who's growing up in Jim Crow, Kansas, and is just able to deal with what life has to throw at him. And we get some great social commentary and racial commentary from Langston Hughes, sort of seen through Sandy's viewpoint. But then just all the moments of joy that he finds throughout, just I found so poignant and moving. And especially the music part of this book is the part that really speaks to me, but we can get into that later. But yeah, so I just really love that. To me, it's sort of a slice of life novel in the vein of some other writers of the time. And just, I think, really captured a lot of the hardship and angst of growing up. So I don't know. I love it.
Slice of life. Okay, I'm gonna remember that to come back to it. But go ahead, Shannon.
My overall thoughts. I don't have a rating system for books. I would like to eventually get that done, but I don't have one right now. But when I first started it, I am so used to reading really more in my genre that it was hard for me to get like I kept wondering, okay, what's going to happen? When's something going to happen? Something going to happen. Oh, wait, this is literary.
Slow down. Yeah.
So once
no shade there, Shannon.
No. So once I got that into my head, like this is a literary novel, so it's really going to hit home on that human experience. Once I had that in my mind, I enjoyed it so much better. Tons and tons of sad parts. But I think it is a good testament to the human spirit and our evolution in humanity itself. I enjoyed it. I was sad. There was lots of it that was sad. But I enjoyed the book immensely.
Mia popped in.
Yay.
So, okay, slice of life. I definitely agree that when you said when something going to happen, I had that initial thing as well, because it was very, I don't know if episodic is the word, but like, here's what happened, and then here's what happened, and then here's what happened. And we're like, but where's, like, what are we driving towards, or what's our goal here? But yeah, literary. You like it. And the slice of life thing. So when you say that, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. So I just want to sort of say how I interpret that, which is, so when I hear slice of life, I think of like a day in the life of. And so like seeing a little bit of someone's day and then inferring whatever is implied about how they got there, how they're making decisions, what their values are, and where they're going from there. But we get like a year. Excuse me, which seems like a pretty good amount of time and a lot of events. Like we start strong with Shannon's favorite, like the hurricane or tornado. I can't remember which one it was. Tornado. And then go through all these events and all these exits and entrances of characters, and then end up with like a vision of life and where the main character is heading. Is that what you meant by slice of life, or do you want to?
Yeah, I think I mean slice of life on a decadal time scale. So I think that we're presented with a somewhat typical childhood in a lot of ways. And so that also means that nothing much happens in the grand sense of like the plot of a novel, right? Like we don't have like a rising and falling action and, sort of all those typical like literary plot points that we're taught to look for. It's just a fairly typical kid, I think, for his time in small town Kansas, just growing up. And so it's just all the typical things that happen to him. And so that's what I mean by slice of life, is there's not really anything extraordinary happening. It just feels very, I guess day to day isn't the right word because of the time scale, but sort of month to month and year to year. It's like, this is just what it was like to be 9 years old to 18 years old at this time period.
And the details. You said growing up in this small town. I'm going to return to the details in a second. But I wanted to shout out the person that helped me cheat on this a little bit, because I'm going to direct you to see Bree's discussion. She had this in her Black Classics book club. And so I definitely have watched this a few times to get a sense of her discussion. She was the person who gave us our second Sunday prompt. And so Black Classic Book Club. I want to give credit to that effort and have people aware of it, because she's doing great work, great discussion over there. She's also for May discussing Their Eyes Were Watching God on June 6th. So I will pop that in the chat next and just put that on people's radar if you're available then. And the other thing that is coming up is the wrap party. So I'm going to pop that in case you're available tomorrow, which I know one of you is. We're just doing a celebration of all the reading and the discussion and the effort that people put into May of the Moderns. So of course you guys are very, I'm very grateful for the work that you have put in or here as well. Okay, so detail. So do things pop out at you as particularly specific or endearing or surprising about the detail that was used? Anything that jumps out at you about that?
The dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think it's very interesting, the dialogue between, the main family that we're with. And then when we, in this later half of the book, we're with the older daughter who is trying to speak, more educated, I guess. I don't remember what term she used, but she used some other term, but, by using more formal vernacular and trying to teach that to Sandy. And I think, but the prose is not written in the same vernacular, right? It's written very much Langston Hughes. So I love that those differences moving through the book.
Yeah, I really like the dialogue too, because it can take, I guess the first time I read this, it took me maybe like a few pages to start getting into it, but then I could like hear the rhythm and have it flow. And so that was really great for sort of setting the scene. But then for me, the music, which I already mentioned, but I love that there were so many snippets of lyrics and just really evocative, poetic descriptions of just the sound of the music. There's a whole chapter where Hughes is just interspersing lyrics of all these blues songs with, just these lyrical descriptions of what the instruments sounded like. And it's like, okay, I'm there in this dance hall right now, like enjoying this. Like that just really, it took me into a different time and place in the way that I think really good historical fiction should. Well, not that it's historical fiction, barely historical fiction, because he published this in 1930, right? So it's not even really historical, but just that feeling of transportation. Yeah.
I wondered how many of those lyrics that he put into the book are actually can be found anywhere else, which I wondered about quite a few times, because I was like, he documented history, but it wasn't history to him. He was just documenting what life was like then, but yet we've got this piece of his history that may not be anywhere else. So.
Yeah. Something to look up. Yeah, go ahead, Margaret.
Is it an unpopular opinion then to say that I don't like reading song lyrics without knowing the music? Because I'm just reading along and like I can't hear the music, so I don't know like what the rhythm is. And
you're also sort of a musical person. Like you've performed for like pretty extensive periods of your life, right? So I think that might be partly coming from that background.
And I'm partially tone deaf, so even if I heard the music, I may not be able to hear it the way it was supposed to be. Most people can hear it.
Yeah. So when I read, like, let me see if I can find. Now that woman down in Georgia's doorknob is hung with black. One knocked on the front door, one knocked on the back. And I think, okay, I can just sort of get like a rocking rhythm to it, but it doesn't feel invested with energy when I'm just reading it without a knowledge of the music. I read it as poetry, and a lot of times the blues, when you read it as poetry, is like it just sounds mumbly in my head. So I'm not a student of the blues. I don't have a background in that, so maybe that's what I need to bone up on if I want to like appreciate this more. But yeah. I really liked the details of let's see. We've got the seasons, we've got the toys, we've got the games, we've got, I mean, we mentioned this before we went live, but the mention of the color of people's skin was very detailed and specific. There was like a paint chip kind of approach to this description, which was interesting. I like the description. I like that they had, I like that he went into detail about the landscape, about what people looked like, but not in the way that they did for the octopus. I don't know if you guys listened to Barrett and I.
Not yet.
You said they did the same exact description over and over. Every time you met the character again, it was the same exact description. Yeah, yes. We didn't have that here.
That was not a problem with this one. No, this was like very lyrical and moving and poetic. You know, it was not so clunky. So I really, really like the description. Let's see. What about? And jump in if you guys have any specifics. Favorite scenes, and then we'll get into characters because I have something to say about characters. But scenes that stick with you, maybe that you were waiting to reread because they stuck out from last year, or that
I don't know if I have a favorite scene, but the one scene that stuck out to me that is still in my head is when Sandy went to go stay with his mom in Chicago, and just explaining the room and hearing the train and how they couldn't even have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, that's really interesting. I've never seen a description. I've never seen a scene set that way before. And this is probably something that was real. This is what happened. So it was very, very well done on the page. And I see that scene over. I'm like, how would you ever have a conversation with anybody?
Yeah.
Then I also thought about his mom and dad being in that room and how they have conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's going off on a bit of a tangent, I guess. But one thing that consistently occurs to me throughout these books is like how do people maintain relationships with each other in a lot of the conditions that are described. And so there's that horrible sounding, noisy Chicago room right next to the L train. But even just in their daily life in Stanton, Kansas, because the level of work that's required just to survive is so intense. And so I sort of found myself wondering about, and yet we see really strong familial relationships, especially in this core family. And then we see references to like other married couples around and things like that. But it's just like, wow, like the drive to create those relationships is so strong that people make it happen even when they're operating in these conditions where they're working like these insanely long hours before dawn to after dusk sort of thing. In terms of favorite scenes, one of the things that stuck with me for this book for a whole year was the natural descriptions. So you mentioned like the seasonal descriptions, because we get a lot of sort of scene setting at the beginning of some of the chapters where Hughes is orienting us in time, like this much time has passed. And so we get the description of the incoming autumn, or we get the description of early summer. And those are so beautiful. And so that really stuck with me. And partly because it hit a nostalgia chord, because it reminded me of like being 9 and reading Anne of Green Gables. Like it has that, which is written in a similar time period, and has in a way a similar style with hitting those like natural chords in the early parts of chapters. And so that sort of scene setting stuck with me. And then I feel really weird about the comparison, because I'm like putting these like Anne of Green Gables next to Langston Hughes, there's like a little bit of a problem there, I think too. Yeah. But stylistically, sort of that era of writing was really evocative in a way that I think is pretty rare in modern writing. So that stuck with me. And then there's one scene that stood out to me in my reread as like, oh wow, this is a really powerful scene. And it's where Sandy, our main character, is he's like a tween, early teenager, working in the hotel, like cleaning up the lobby and as a shoe shine boy. Yeah. And we get this really interesting interaction where a Black man has come up, I think from Alabama, and is in the hotel for the day, and Sandy shines his shoes. And then this man is like making him wait to be paid, and starts like joking with him and making fun of him, and then is demanding that he dance. Or actually, I guess, well, I thought, no, it must have been a white man, I guess.
I think it was a white man.
Yeah, it must have been a white man now that I'm thinking about it. And is demanding that he dance, and is saying like, well, down in the South, if I asked a Black kid to dance, he would do it in a heartbeat, because the repercussions of not doing what the white person says are so intense. But in Kansas, we're just in enough of a different context that Sandy is like, I'm not going to do this. Like, I don't even care if you don't pay me, I'm going to leave. And I thought that was just, like an interesting bit of what the racial interactions were at that time, that we got that difference just in Kansas. And maybe it was, I guess, sort of set off. I was reading Winfred Rembert's autobiography, Chasing Me to My Grave. I don't know if you all have heard that, but it's Jim Crow era, slightly later than this book, when this book takes place in like the 50s and 60s. And it's another like tale of childhood in Jim Crow, Georgia, and the conditions that he grew up in were in a lot of ways so much worse in terms of outright physical violence compared to what Sandy dealt with, that I was sort of sitting there comparing these two books in my mind, and was like, Winfred Rembert probably would have been killed if he'd responded in that same way, even 30, 40 years later, compared to how Sandy responded in that hotel. So that scene really stood out to me on a reread of just like, wow, getting that difference between different parts of the US was interesting.
I was actually scared for Sandy in that scene. I did think he was going to have some physical violence toward him. And I'm glad I didn't see that, but I knew that it could happen.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a fine balance in that scene. I was like, what's going to happen? Yeah, I was on the edge of my seat too.
Yeah.
The scene that stands out to me was an emotional pull scene. So that's one of my usual questions for buddy reads is what was like the emotional pull or like the tense heart of the book. And for me, it was wrapped up in several interactions about the Christmas present. So there's a part where he really wants a sled for Christmas, and it's a specific store-bought sled. And he realizes that his mom's getting him a neighbor to make a homemade sled, and he gets it, and he has to pretend that he likes it because he knows, you know, he can't disappoint his mom. And he's ashamed of the sled, right? Because it's homemade, he doesn't want to have to go out and use it. But then he gets the present from his aunt, who's the stuck-up sort of middle-class older sister, and it makes the cheaper books that his mom and grandmother got him look tawdry. So he's ashamed of those gifts, and it's just like this spiral of like, what is given with love? What is the value of those gifts? And how can someone who is not giving with love make your feelings change and sort of twist you around and upset what you want your life to look like? So that one was really affecting. It was a good scene. Yeah. And the Children's Day, the coupon tragedy. I was like, no, I know what's going to happen. I can tell. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, just the unwritten rules We're
in spoiler territory, right?
Yeah, I mean, book from 1930.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Well, and there's no real overarching plot, so, you know.
Right.
Right.
Spoil, yeah.
True.
Yeah. So yeah, just so that people know what I'm referring to, there's a newspaper advertisement that children can collect coupons in the newspaper, and then they can go in this one day for free. And when they go in, it's actually an out-of-town carnival, and so they bring their own rules, which is that, if we don't specify, we only mean white kids. So all the they say colored in the book. I don't want to say that. I'm going to say kids of color. So even though that's wrong for the time, they arrive and they have the coupons, and some of them are upset and some of them are angry and some of them are like, you know, Sandy actually gives his to a white friend from school who walks in, and a white kid doesn't get it. And he's like, here.
And they don't inform him either.
No.
So, and I think it's interesting how they brought up, you know, how Buster was able to get in because he looked white, even though he was black.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so that brings up, you know, that whole idea that what can you pass for? And later on, how things were like, even if you have like a little bit of black in your line, you were considered black. It didn't matter. So that still affects my family to this day because my oldest son is mixed. And I always try to tell him be proud of both his heritage, but by high school, he was calling himself black. And so one day I asked him, I said, well, why do you call yourself black? He says, because that's what the kids think of me as. Mm. So I still see that idea. You can't be of different cultures. You have to be one or the other.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we see a lot in the first maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of the book, but a lot about how kids are taught about race. And that was really driven home to me of like, these are not innate differences that we're talking about. I mean, of course, people have different colored skin. Like that's an innate difference that we can't change. But the way that we ascribe value to that is something that these kids are taught so viscerally in this book. And that was really powerful to me on a second read through as well, especially now being a parent of, I guess, a little bit more of an aware kid, where we're starting to think about just like her cognitive function, right? And like how she perceives the world. But it's just like, oh yeah, like kids are taught this stuff. Kids aren't born, you know, bigoted or prejudiced. Like they're taught this in very explicit ways. And white supremacy, like that's one of the big tools of white supremacy is that we ram it down our kids' throats. So.
And one of the details that I was going to mention, and I forgot because my brain went sideways, was that they talked about the neighborhood being mixed. And I think I saw this in the commentary as well, like the White House and the Black House, the White House, and they're just living amongst each other, which is something we think didn't happen because that's the last 50 years. That's because that's what the housing lenders have encouraged. And that's, you know, what the economic situation has encouraged. So that's what we've grown up with for a couple generations now. But, you know, poverty used to be less or more race blind, I should say. And maybe in Kansas, this was a situation, but in some other places it was not. And it's just good to know that it was diverse at one point. And so the way things are is not the way they have always been. So that was an interesting lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although diverse, but still segregated, because we get Sandy talking about, even though the house like just across the street was a white family, he never played with those kids. Those were like the mean white kids because they used pejorative to refer to him as opposed to, his other white friends that he had around the neighborhood and through school. So that was sort of interesting too, of like creating pockets even within, what would look like.
That might be a power dynamic thing, because if you're both poor, that's the white supremacy at work, because you want to put someone down to feel better. Whereas if you're in the school and you're obviously in a better neighborhood, then you don't feel like you have to put someone down with like slurs.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yay, Barrett! Very good. And it's a quick read too. I don't know if that was your experience for the two of you.
Like 220. Much quicker than the octopus.
It was hard to get into for me, right? Because like I thought, I said, when is something going to happen? When is something going to happen? Oh, right. This is literary.
But it was enjoyable. Definitely.
Yes, it was. Once I finally got it in my head, okay, this is not genre, focus. This is literary. Then I was able to shift it. And then I started really enjoying it much better.
Yeah. What about characters? So my favorite part about this is like mapping the different character journeys. And here's my thesis. Tell me if you agree or disagree. Everyone in here is a tragic character except the main character. Yes or no? Interesting. So we've got 3 sisters. We've got a mother. We've got a grandson. We've got neighbors. We've got
Harriet's tragic in the end.
Harriet?
In the end?
Yeah, Harriet's the one I feel conflicted about.
Yeah. Because she was tragic for most of the book. But at the end, I think she was able to finally find her happiness.
Or at least her power.
Her power, her happiness, and her ability to be able to help those around her.
That's true. That's true. Okay, I'll give her like a half star.
Yeah. Harriet is a bit iffy. Yeah, because of course the life path she chose is certainly a very difficult one. But like I think the fact that she was able to choose that had like so much meaning to her as a character, that even if it didn't result in sort of a traditional way of thinking about happiness, that maybe it's still what she would have chosen. I don't know.
I think she was happy in the end because she loves singing. She always loved singing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And she definitely didn't want to, she didn't want to work for other people.
No.
Yeah, which she definitely, and specifically for white people. And it seemed like she was,
maybe that's how she's still tragic. Maybe if she saw the same thoughts, because she hated all white people there at least that's what we got early in the book, that she hated white people. All white people were bad. So it would be tragic if she went her whole life thinking that all white people were bad. But we don't know if she changed on that or not.
We do get the commentary, which I think is really interesting at the very end of the book, where she goes, oh, well, but the Jews aren't so bad. And they're the ones who control theater. Right. Yeah, she said basically, like, if you've got talent and can perform, Jewish folks are going to let you perform. And so, I think the subtext is they're not so bad and they're the ones that control Broadway. So I've actually got a shot here. And I was like, I'm not sure how I should be reading this particular paragraph.
Yeah, me too. I wondered the same thing. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly the way I'm tempted to read it is basically what you just said, Shannon, where she was sort of coming to a point of like she'd gotten out of her small town that was much more towards the South, even though it's not in the deep South, and was sort of realizing that there was room for her to, live the life that she wanted, or at least something close to it, and use her talents, and that there were some white people that were, helping to provide space for that. I mean, in a pecuniary way, not out of the goodness of their hearts, but a little bit more of being sort of at peace with that structure of the world. But yeah, it was a weird paragraph.
But did it hit you for that same paragraph? The one thing that hit me was that Jews have been the most persecuted of all peoples who are, segregated by certain things. They've been the most persecuted in history. So that hit me that she brought up the Jews, and that we're in a book where, of course, that the people of color were not seen as equals. That hit me in that paragraph. I don't know. Sorry.
Do you have that one turned down? Because I don't remember where it was except near the end. And I'm not sure if you're referring to the book, quote from the book, or because isn't she still living in essentially like a whorehouse at the end?
No.
She's traveling. She's in Chicago performing. Yeah. She's on the road.
I'm trying to think. Oh, yeah, it's earlier in the book where he has to go and talks to the lady and she calls up and everything. That's earlier. You're right. Okay.
Barrett, find a way to use pecuniary in your middle grade. Now I'm like, I hope I used that word correctly, but I think I did.
You did.
Yeah.
Thank you, SATs.
Speaking of pecuniary, so I wanted to bring up this resource because I mentioned this at the outset that I was reading Not Without Laughter at the same time as Tell My Horse by Zora Neale Hurston. And Tell My Horse just got my attention so much more interesting. It could be because she's a woman and, you know, women writers seem to have more of a hold on me. But so there was a beef between these two. They're both like shining stars of the Harlem Renaissance and both doing their thing. And so I just looked that up before this. So just to add a little fuel to the fire of the discussion here, I'm going to pop this in the chat. The beef was because there was a white lady who had purse strings who was paying both of them. And she gave them different contracts. She said Langston Hughes could be paid to write his own work and could show it to anyone. And Zora Neale Hurston was paid to collect stories and could not share it with anyone except the white lady. And she was known as Godmother. And this article that I just put up here has some things to say about like what kind of dynamic that gave to the partnership and how they started out. They really wanted to write this play together, Mule No More, Mule something with the title. And they started out writing different versions as well as with the secretary typist. And they all sort of thought that it was their own thing. And then they got, so that was the beef. That was the origin of the discontent. And it's sad to think about. But now I like both of them. And I can sort of understand, okay, different styles, different satiations, I guess. But yeah. White lady with the purse strings. Nope.
Yeah. Well, there's some misogyny going on there, it sounds like. And we definitely get a lot of that in this book too, going back to this book. And I feel like not really from Langston Hughes himself in terms of like an authorial voice, but probably a pretty accurate depiction of, today's culture too. But yeah, there's a lot of like observed misogyny in this book. And we see Sandy, our main character, who's a tween and then a teen, like trying to navigate that. And he's like, why are we treating women this way?
Yeah.
And I'm like, resist, Sandy, resist.
And I think Sandy did a pretty good job of resisting, just taking someone's opinion as fact. He took what everybody said and he kind of shifted through to come up with his own ideas. But I think you're right, because there's a lot of misogyny in the book. And I often was looking at the prose to see, okay, is this Langston Hughes, the author, coming through, or is this and I came to the same conclusion as you. He was just representing the time period. It was not his own thought, at least not in what we could see here.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of an example for that and how you could tell which it is? Because I often will struggle with whose voice is it? Is it the authorial voice or is it the character voice, or who's saying what here? So one of my feelings that was pretty strong was that he's definitely putting Tempe in a certain light and saying a certain thing about people like Tempe as a character, as an author. And I think that's pretty clear. But in terms of misogyny, can you give me an example or discuss?
Who was the girl that Sandy liked? Trying to remember her name.
Seta.
Oh, yeah. So, it was definitely coming across that she was supposedly easy. In my opinion, men and women should be able to enjoy bedroom affairs as much as they want to. And it shouldn't be held against them if they're male or female. It shouldn't be. If you want to do that, then that's your business, as long as you're not hurting somebody. But it came across that because she was the female half of enjoying these affairs, she was easy. Right. But it always came through for me in the character's voice, the people, the other boys who were talking about her.
Yeah,
And
when we
this is
get a
when we
lot
were
of,
like 16 too, just FYI.
yeah, not
yeah.
the 9-year-old. Well,
Right.
and we get Sandy really thinking about it, and he's saying, well, why? He's like, why does the fact that she has a boy over for a few hours in the evening when her mom's not home, why does that mean a bad thing about her? And
Right.
so the fact that we were getting, there's not a lot of like internal monologue in this book, but when we were getting it, we were often getting Sandy just questioning why things are the way they are. And so he would question that. He would also question some of the race relations we would see. And then for me, the misogyny piece, the pancetta stuff is really telling, I think. But then also we'd get these descriptions of like what he's overhearing from the older guys in the barbershop. And so he's in this exclusively like adult male space. And we have a kid who's been raised exclusively by women because his dad has been gone a lot of the time. And he's sort of reporting back to the reader a bit of what he's hearing in these conversations. And again, he's constantly asking why. He's like, well, I don't understand what that means. I don't understand why we're talking about, girls like this. And he'll sort of say like, oh, I can kind of get it. Like girls are pretty and I'm physically attracted to them. But like he's constantly questioning why there's a negative connotation associated to these things. And so that's what made me think maybe Hughes was sort of pointing a spotlight at that in a way. And in 1930, I think that would have been very,
Revolutionary.
Revolutionary to be sort of
Totally.
pointing that out. Yeah. So that was why I was thinking that.
That's great.
And, I think I often heard, like when I heard Sandy questioning things, I often wonder if that was Langston Hughes remembering how he questioned things when he was those ages.
Yeah. The extra twist of the barbershop thing was that usually when he mentions that, they were talking about his aunt, Harriet. And so it was like extra, like, why are they saying bad things about this person I love? And so we'd have to filter it through, like, are they saying a bad thing? But the other like, oh, my tender heart can't take this was when they were talking about, when Sandy was trying to figure out how to take jokes and like deflect them. And that was like a man thing that he didn't grow up knowing how to do. And so he took a while before he realized what to say. And then he had this one line that he could toss back that was like, so's your mother, and he felt like he could actually take it. And I was like, this is so cute.
That was really cute.
Yeah. But that's hard. That's one of the things we all learn as kids is like, how do you make it not so personal? How do you interact with people in a way that's like, okay, my private life is this, and there's the boundary, and like this is how I have to behave outside. So it's difficult.
Yeah, I thought that particular example with Sandy was he kept getting jokes about his hair because his name Sandy comes from the sandy color to his hair because he is mixed race, and so he learned to deflect it. But then we also have an example earlier in the book where Harriet tells him that her formative experience that made her start really hating white people was getting teased about her hair by other white girls when she was a kid. And I don't know that I'm like supposed to means in the context of literature, supposed to compare those, but that stood out to me a little bit of we've got, two people who are related, have a similar upbringing and respond to teasing about their hair in different ways. I think Harriet seems like she internalized it more, whereas Sandy, sort of doesn't let it touch like the core of himself. And I just thought that was interesting because hair is such a touchy, racial stereotype, and to have those two characters respond differently in those contexts, I thought was interesting.
Well, I do think that females do tend to attack other females more in a
more meanly,
right? Versus men who are often doing it jokingly. That's what I found. So
yeah, girls are mean.
Yes.
Okay, what about naming? So I thought that was another interesting thing in this book. So we have Sandy, who's actually James. I'm trying to think if there's if it was just his hair. It's just his hair?
Yeah, it's just his hair.
Okay. Yeah. So Sandy, but he goes by James when he goes to his middle-class aunt's house because she calls him by his real name. We've got Aunt Hager, who is the grandma, but everyone calls her Aunt. So that's like a bit like discombobulating at the beginning. What was the other thing?
Jim Boy.
Yeah. And so, like, what conclusions do you draw from how naming is treated? Like whether you go by your formal name or not, or who's calling you what?
Well, I think for like the grandma's Aunt Hager, I think that was more of like that was accepted like in the community that they're in, that everybody was an aunt. So it's almost like everybody's family to everybody. That's kind of how I took that.
Well, and she seemed to be a real leader. Well, I don't know if leader is the right word, but like everybody respected her and would turn to her for, nursing and caregiving, white folks and Black folks alike. So yeah, I definitely felt like there was that sort of community respect aspect to her, sort of, having a title almost to other people, or people were able to sort of claim kinship in a way because, she was there caring for everyone.
And people in the church that they're in, they call each other Sister Whiteside or Sister Williams.
Yeah.
So there's that, kinship. That's true.
Which an aunt would be higher than sister, because an aunt kind of, you think of being an adult, someone in an adult role, versus sister could be in any role. I
think it's less hierarchical than that. I think they're just two titles that exist together. But yeah,
I saw it as being higher. And when I was reading, like everyone saw her as being like a figurehead to look up to.
We're getting Barrett saying that's fairly common in evangelical churches.
Right.
I assume the sister and brother thing. Yeah. Which actually I was a little bit confused because we had the church aspect, but then we also had the lodge, and I wasn't entirely, which I should have Googled, but I wasn't.
Lodge?
Yeah, the lodge and the neighbor, Madame de Carter, who was like really high up in lodge leadership and was constantly like traveling out of state to do like regional lodge stuff,
right?
I guess.
International Day where they were dressing up and had flags and stuff. And
they had that. Yeah, so I really wanted to know more about that, and like historically, because I assume that is a reflection of a real, social structure at the time. So I would like to learn more about that.
I think that's in my mind, that's the equivalent of like the Daughters of the American Revolution kind of thing, like the women's civic organizations.
Or I was thinking like the Masons, but on the other side for females.
Right. SBCs.
What's an SBC, Barrett?
SBC. I'm trying to place it.
The South Baptist Church.
There we go. Southern Baptist Church.
Oh.
Ding, ding, ding.
I went to the Baptist Church, and they also called everybody sister and brother in the Baptist Church.
Okay, yeah.
And I was in the South because I was in Miami, so that's where I kind of.
Is Miami the South?
It's a different type of South, but it is South. It's a totally different type of South.
Right. Shannon gets it. Shannon gets another trivia point. So. Okay, so naming. I like that. What else? Anything other than that stand out to you guys? We had a little bit of discussion of passing towards the end, and I know some of the people in the Readathon have read Passing. Marilyn was talking about reading that yesterday and really enjoying it. Or no, Alba was, and Marilyn read it earlier. And I read that one last year. That was talk about interlacing of layers. Like when you think of like how many ways you're affecting people and people are affecting you in your interactions. Like when he talks about his friend who can pass for white and how he's going to do that as soon as he gets out of this one horse town kind of thing. And he just says like, go with God, kind of good luck, because he can see the benefits, and why wouldn't you? What did you guys think about the commentary there?
I mean, if I was in that position, if I was Black, but I could pass for white, I would do the same thing he did. And I think Sandy kind of came to that conclusion, like, yeah, that's something that you probably do. You would do what you could to be better in society, I think. I don't know. That would be my thought.
Yeah. So the big counterpoint to that is that it's risky, because once you're in a society that values this, and you're fooling them in their own minds that you are this thing, then you're always at risk. And so you sort of never get to let your guard down, and all your relationships are based on fictions at that point.
I'm introverted. I don't have many relationships anyway, so.
That's the solution to everything. Be introverted.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we get a lot of exploration of like how to be, I guess, in this book. So we do get some explicit discussion about passing and like what would you gain by passing. We don't get the flip side of what would you lose. Like if this character Buster were to go 100% with moving to another city and trying to, sort of erase his past and pass as white, he would lose a lot of, rich culture and heritage and family connections. And we don't see that explicitly mentioned. Right. Yeah. But then we also get some pretty explicit comparisons between the three, I guess I shouldn't say middle-aged because Harriet is a teenager for the large part of the book, but the three sisters. So Sandy's mom, Angie, and her older sister, Tempe, and her younger sister, Harriet. So we do get sort of three different ways of kind of being a Black woman. So we get Tempe, who, essentially is trying to be the best of the best and to get money and to get social position, even though what?
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, and we get explicit references too to like Dubois, right? So Tempe, Du Bois, I guess is how it's supposed to be said. So, Tempe is like, believes in Du Bois and like the talented 10th idea, right? So she's like, there's talented Black people who have to uplift the whole race. And then we get Angie, who's basically just trying to survive in a lot of ways. And then we get Harriet, who's like, buck convention, buck what white folks, think about us, like, whatever, I'm going to follow my joy.
Yeah.
And so we get like a few different clear paths, and we get sort of an exploration of like where those can lead our characters and the trade-offs that people make in those. So I find that a really interesting part of the book to think about.
Yeah. I was just going to say, because you were talking about the trade-offs in passing, and I feel like Tempe is almost like having to do that just to be the middle-class Black success story, because she doesn't visit her mother's house. She doesn't want to be seen going around with her mom in her apron, and she just has this shame about where she came from and like this fear of being tainted by her family, which is horrible. So you feel like, how is she really happy in that life?
She didn't seem happy to me.
No, she doesn't. I mean, there's like a very tentative little like curling leaf of maybe like a growth of like, she does want Sandy to succeed and she's trying to mother him, but she's not a mother. So it's just like, you see those moments and you're like, well, did you try? I don't know if I could say you tried, but like, I don't know. She thought she was doing the best thing.
And I think it provided Sandy a different way of looking at life so that he could decide what he wanted to do with his life.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So I think it was important. I think that's this idea of where she brought up Dubois, right? Which I've always heard of Dubois, where I've been. And was it the Booker T. Washington? Was it Booker T. Washington?
Yep.
Yes. Mm-hmm. How the grandmother liked Booker T. Washington and his message, but Tempe did not. The older sister did not, and put him down. I'm like, wow, I would have never known, because I grew up where we had a Booker T. Washington in Miami, Florida, elementary, and I like the kids were super proud. And I mean, I just remember those days when we would celebrate these important days in Black history, and I never once heard anybody ever say, oh well, Booker T. Washington's message was to I can't remember how she put it in the book, but basically was not as good as Dubois and should not be listened to.
So I think to frame it, because I looked this up before too in my 10 minutes of preparation, the article that summarized it for me was that, so Bethanne mentioned the talented 10th and how Du Bois was about civic rights and education. So like demand that we have equal access now. And Booker T. Washington was more about vocational skills and being model citizens and like demonstrating deservingness so that you would be granted those rights later.
And she thought that was keeping Blacks in their place, basically, and now allowing them to go higher.
Right. Yeah. And so you've got these like poles are basically like struggling for what is the best way to be a credit to the race, as the phrase went in that time period. How are you going to be a great man? Oh, and there's that's one of my favorite lines. Did you guys catch that one? Let me see if I marked it down. 185. So towards the end, when we're getting towards our like message of the theme of the book.
Oh yeah, it's Booker T.
Yeah. Let's see. 5. 1 page off here. Where's the... Oh, did I put the wrong name?
Well, that is a good place where Sandy, I think, for the first time thought, wow, I don't have to think like anybody else. I can think for myself, basically, when he says both of them were great men.
Mm.
And
now I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Because I have a different edition, so I'm like, my page number.
Yeah. And I think I had the wrong page for the quote that... Oh, here we go. It's 160. Sorry. The one I was looking for was 160. So he's sitting there in the back room of the hotel. Sandy wondered how people got to be great, as one by one he made the spittoons bright and beautiful. He wondered how people made themselves great. And that hits a little different these days with that phrase. So I'm like, yeah, make yourself great. And then he's looking at his different role models. But I just love that line. This, kid working his way through.
Yeah, well, and that line struck me because, we've got this kid dreaming about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois and is like, should I be like those guys? But he's also taking pride in the work that he's doing at the moment. And I felt like we got that in Sandy and in Aunt Hager, who, of course, she was worked to death, which is awful, but she also took pride in her work and her ability to provide for her family. And with her, it was a little different because she did grow up, in literal slavery pre-Civil War, and then went through all of the, Reconstruction and then the advent of Jim Crow. And so that pride might be coming from a different place. But we do see that like self-worth and pride and value in the work, even if it's not Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois specifically. And so I felt like we did get to see, especially in the second half of the novel, Sandy just sort of struggling with that of like, not just how do I be great, but even do I want to be great if it means that maybe I have to give up going to the pool hall? And it's like, no, let's like find a way to keep the pool hall in your life because that's clearly fun, So yeah, that whole conversation that he was having sort of internally was really interesting to me.
But I thought that was so indicative of a teenager. You get to a point where like, well, I just want to have fun. I don't want to have to worry about what am I going to do for the rest of my life. I want to take this moment and just have some fun.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this book sets up an impossible standard for like a Black youth? If someone was reading that at the time, because when I look at this, like he is so innocent in his thinking and he is so considered in his like, what do I take in? How do I evaluate what people are giving me? And then, ultimately, spoiler, his message at the end is, I won't disappoint you, to his grandmother. And he's going to get his education come hell or high water. And so he's going for the righteous path, if you will, with his family background. So is it trying to think like how to frame this, because today the argument is that what we focus on is Black trauma. And so we're not examining the whole experience and giving it the roundedness of full characters get, because we're still in a white supremacist society. But looking at this in 1930, do you think there was any sense of like pointing to this as the role model to be? And it was so difficult to be that person at that time. So people would have felt like they didn't measure up. Is that just my projection?
I think it was a great book for any person of color to be able to use this and say, I want to be as grounded in my thinking and as open in my thinking and to be better than what society wants to make me be.
Good.
Yeah, I really like that aspect of it. The part that, especially if I'm trying to think about, more than half a century ago, I'm like, but we still have the problem where he doesn't know how he's going to feed himself. And so that's where we sort of end up, where he knows that he doesn't have any family financial support, and he's decided that he wants to continue his education. He's like, I'm going to work nights and make it happen. And it's like, okay, I've spent almost 300 pages in my edition with you, so I believe that you can do it. But from more of a broader perspective, it's like that does seem more aspirational than practical, just because it's hard to focus on your education if you're hungry. So yeah, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that question, I guess. Because I'm like, on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, because he arrived at this point where he's like, I love to read and I love to learn. And so I can do that. And I also don't have to give up these other parts of myself because he's sort of rooted in his family at the end. Well, and I guess, and now I'm just like rambling through here, but we actually do get a bit of a silver lining with Harriet at the end, don't we? So actually now I'm erasing what I just said about like, we do have a path forward for Sandy.
Could always go back to Tempe too, but to be for reality, right? And probably not every person of color had those choices. They probably didn't have someone that they could rely on to go back and live with, or someone to give them money so they could go to school.
Yeah, well, and we also don't know how reliable Harriet is going to be either, because we know that like she seems to be doing flush for like the next 6 months, I think, is the horizon that we're given. But we don't know how long that'll last. But I think, I mean, that's sort of part of it, right? Is that uncertainty is a fact of life, and you know, nothing's ever going to be certain. And so Sandy's sort of saying like, you know what, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to try. The way seems clear for now. Yeah.
I guess you talked me back around to thinking that it's okay to have a happy ending in a book.
I know. I felt like it was a happy
literature
ending.
Doesn't have to reflect real life.
Oh, Sandy.
Well, I mean, it's a happy ending for Sandy, but for the whole experience, it's not happy.
No, that's what I was saying. Like almost everyone is a tragic character. From that, Bethanne reminded me of like Aunt Hager's past is clinging to that witless white woman who couldn't handle the end of the Civil War. Like, oh my God. And then like doesn't provide for the one person who stands by her. So that was, and it was just like a paragraph. And then she's like, yeah. And then anyway, that was pretty tragic. Yes. So Barrett's saying he's excited to check it out. And Savion's saying not many get to read his books. His poems are pushed or mentioned more. Yeah, well,
I'm gonna read more of his books.
What's that?
But I'm gonna read more of his books. I have a handy little list in the front of my edition of like other, you know, works of fiction by Langston Hughes. So
nice.
Make it happen.
And when we were talking about Empire, so a couple Sundays ago, Roz and I were looking at Claude McKay and his poems because he's a Jamaican American who's also in London. He's got all these really cool experiences, and he's put them into fiction. So he's someone who is known for both fiction and poetry, and has a really like flaming strong voice in poetry. So I'm very curious to read Banjo and Banana Bottom, which are his two most well-known novels, which I just saw at the used bookstore. So yeah, it's good. May of the Moderns, opening eyes. Bear says that's fair. Even says cool. Wish I would have known about this before today.
The last thing.
Yeah. And Neil says we didn't read this one either. Interesting. Wonder. Yeah. I mean, I definitely didn't read this in high school. We read Beloved, which I was not prepared for. I think I would have done better with a book like this that was a little bit more from the point of view of a younger person than Beloved, but what are you gonna do? Schools be schooling. I don't know. Yeah. What? So Bethanne said you're interested in some of the other books that are recommended. Shannon, what do you think? Is this like whetted your appetite for any other type of book, any poetry or a different author?
It makes me want to go back and read his poetry, honestly. But I think I'm ready to go back into my genre of reading.
Yeah. Let's see. Harriet's message. Okay. So I think that's all my points. If you guys had any other notes that you wanted to bring up, now's the time. We got like 1 minute and we can go over, but
I just love this book.
I really loved it too.
Now I got to find my own copy instead of the libraries. Yeah.
One thing that we talked about that I had brought up was how, you know, today it's not acceptable to use food for skin coloring.
Right.
And there's a lot of it. I like the one book I marked here, Mustard Colored Man.
Yeah.
So it's like, But I did love how
all up and down the scale. Yeah.
I did love all the different shades that was discussed. And then they even went into like what like the men would talk about. Well, I like, what was the one line? Like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but the blacker she is, the sweeter she is.
Blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. That one.
Yeah. I couldn't exactly remember what it was, but I was like, oh, I've never heard of some of these things before.
Yeah, the colorism was very interesting and very uncomfortable to read. And we mentioned sort of earlier just the brief point about like in a lot of times and places oppressed people punch down on even more oppressed people, and we've got colorism, you know, as part of that. Yeah, that was hard to read.
I also liked the scene of the dance. We were talking about the music and the detail. It sort of all came together in that dance. And I can remember the description of him going up to the balcony level and putting two chairs together because he was tired, but watching all the couples and what they were saying to each other. And that was really fun. Like the sneaking out with his aunt. And, but then you're also witnessing like the social dynamics of the dance and preferences of the boys and whatnot. So heartwarming, heart-rending, you know.
I'd say the saddest part for me was Aunt Hager passing away. That was the saddest for me. I actually had a tear in my eye.
Yeah. That was, I think I actually cried a year ago, and this year I was like, I'm gonna skim this part. I did skim that part.
Yeah.
And it was just so well done, because it's not like, in a way, it's almost more, the writing is almost more sparse than a lot of the other writing in the book is, because I mean, it just fit this, you know, teenage kid so well. He's like, he can't even talk about the grief. And so we don't get a very lyrical description of it, like you might expect based on other parts of the book. We just get this like raw, quiet response. It was heartbreaking.
It was.
We get
the book is supposed to end right now. She just died.
Yeah. We get the awkwardness of not being able to have a final moment with his grandmother alone because of all the other women who were there as part of the sort of cultural final moments.
Yeah, the community aspect of it.
Yeah, you feel like it's right because that's what she expected for the end of her life, but then you also feel it's wrong because he didn't get that final moment. But then also he's already equipped. He already has like the love and the message and the training from his grandmother. So yeah, that was good. Well, I think we'll wrap up our buddy read for our last May of the Moderns read of Not Without Laughter by Langston Hughes. We all give it thumbs up. Yes, I want to read some more from Langston Hughes, whether poetry or prose. And this and other videos for May of the Moderns, which is 1901 to 1945, I forgot to say this at the beginning, are all in the playlist. So if you want to check that out on my channel under playlists, should be right at the top. And talked about a lot of books, to a lot of like prompts discussion on Sundays, and had a lot of fun. So I'm going to be woofing off to June vacation.
Woo! You deserve it.
Say this was the last one of the May of the Moderns?
Yes.
I was in the first and the last one.
Yes.
I was with Ben.
Buddy reads. Yeah. Very cool. Yay. And tomorrow is the wrap party. So that's the other thing I want to remind people. I have the link in case anyone wants to put notifications on.
And right before the wrap-up party is did you put it in there?
No, go ahead. You say it and I'll pop it in.
Okay. Yeah. Right before the wrap-up party, I will be doing my 1-year celebration on my channel with my husband. So it's the first time he'll be on screen with me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Don't miss out.
Yeah, I will try to pop in the chat for both of those videos.
He tried to tell me, he says, don't ever tell anybody that I am Black. And I'm like, why? He goes, because people have discrimination against Black and white people sometimes being together. And this was right after someone at work told him that we probably wouldn't be accepted in our community because of the fact that we were white and Black versus Black and Black or white and white. So, and I told him, I said, I don't care about that.
Yeah. I mean, we're coming up on Pride Month, so can we use love is love is love for this? Yeah. If you can get it, hold on to it. I'm
and he's an awesome individual and an awesome spouse. I couldn't have asked for anything better. I'm going to read my dedication to him on screen too that I wrote in my last book.
Oh, definitely got to be there for that.
Yeah, it's going to be cute. Awesome.
All right, so I popped that link into the chat, so everyone go check that out for tomorrow, and then we'll see you at the wrap party, which some of the other May of the Moderns readers will be at. Savion saying this is cool to listen to. Great book to end with, definitely. Can't wait for Shannon's stream with her husband. RC Scott coming in to say hello. And oh, that was based on what Shannon's comment was. Yeah. We can't wait to cheer you on. So for sure, you'll have a little cheering section full of emojis, I'm sure. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, watchers out there and readers out there for the Readathon. It's been great fun to have you on and watching and commenting and everything. And happy reading for the rest of the month. And we'll see you in June.
Bye.
Bye.